The survival horror genre is nearly synonymous with zombies. While definitely not the first of its kind, Resident Evil's extreme popularity brought survival horror to the mainstream and made the flesh-eating zombie a staple in gaming. The survival aspect of these early horror games typically tasked players with remaining alive with limited supplies, but in around 2010, an explosion of survival titles began to invade the market and redefined what it actually meant to truly survive. Minecraft, Terraria, 7 Days to Die, DayZ, H1Z1, Don't Starve, and many, many others took the concept of survival and pushed it to the extreme. Players didn't just need to watch their health, but also their stamina and their hunger. Finding a safe place to rest often meant you actually had to build that place out of items scavenged in the wilderness. And to survive the night from the terrors that stalk you, gamers usually needed to craft their supplies, erect impenetrable defenses, construct intricate traps, and pray that all goes according to plan. Survival suddenly found a new way to be scary again. State of Decay was one of those zombie-themed open-world survival games released during this period. Despite the market being flooded with similar titles, State of Decay found ways to stand out from the crowd and deliver an experience that really couldn't be found elsewhere. State of Decay was developed by Undead Labs, a small studio formed in 2009 by Jeff Strain, the founder of ArenaNet and co-creator of World of Warcraft. Strain understood the desire to have an online MMO zombie survival game, but after seeing so many others go in that direction, he decided to steer development of the studio's first title into the easier-to-develop single-player territory. In 2011, the title was first announced as an Xbox Live arcade game and was officially launched in 2013. For an indie title, the game was a phenomenal hit, so much so that Undead Labs agreed to sign a multi-year, multi-title agreement with Microsoft in 2014, and by 2018, they became absorbed by the video game giant. Because State of Decay released so late in the Xbox 360's lifespan, the game saw a re-release on the Xbox One in the form of State of Decay Year 1 Survival Edition. This package not only included the core game with some minor upgrades, but both downloadable expansions as well. We will be covering all of this content over the course of this review. The core concept of State of Decay is to lead a group of stranded refugees out of the zombie-infested hills of the rural town of Trumbull Valley. In order to do this, you'll need to set up a viable base of operations, recruit a competent group of survivors, scavenge for supplies, and use your governing prowess to ensure the safety of everyone, both from the Walking Dead and each other. Players begin the game as Marcus, a store clerk who, along with his friend Ed, has just spent his weekend fishing in the wilderness of Trumbull Valley. Soon after returning, the duo are suddenly ambushed by the ravenous Undead and must fend for their lives. It's not long after that they are joined by Maya, a former soldier, who informs them that while they were gone, all hell was unleashed, with the flesh-eating horde already consuming most of the town. It becomes apparent, then, that they must escape this confined mountain region, but that's far easier said than done. The forests provide little protection from either the zombies or the elements, and the city's streets are quickly being overrun by lumbering corpses. The game guides you to your first settlement, providing you with a handful of survivors and gear, but from there, it's largely up to you how you'll manage to survive. State of Decay relies on a large degree of random generation. Groups of survivors will be placed arbitrarily across the large map, meaning you may stumble upon some powerful allies early on, or they may be located far from your starting point. The movements of the zombie horde are also different for each playthrough, with some buildings being completely overrun or relatively bare depending on your circumstances. You'll also never uncover the same gear in the same locations, hence, you're really encouraged to investigate every area if you aim to stay fully outfitted. There are story missions that become available after you reach certain thresholds, but there are plenty of areas where the plot branches off, letting you decide which direction you want to go. You can choose to aid a group of outlaws who are exploiting the already chaotic situation, or maybe you want to lend a hand to the powerful yet secretive Special Forces military that has just arrived. It's all in these ways that State of Decay lends itself well to replayability. You can easily start up a new game and begin your quest for survival, creating goals for yourself such as to explore every building on the map, or have 0 deaths, or escape in the fastest time. It's really all up to you. The fact that you never fully know what to expect when entering into a new area also keeps the blood pumping even after multiple sessions. There's always the chance you may wander upon a deadly surprise. Although you begin the game as Marcus, you'll frequently need to switch between survivors if you want to achieve victory. All survivors you encounter have their own individual traits, personalities, and attributes. Maya, being a soldier for instance, is much more skilled in firearms than many others, thus her aim is superior right from the start. Others may be trek runners, thus they can run long distances without getting tired. There are also negative traits, with each character usually having at least 1 or 2. Some may have chronic fatigue, which hampers your stamina, or have 2 left feet, which slows their experience gain from fighting. You also have traits that determine a survivor's personality, and it will be your job as leader to balance these egos, just as you would in a real survival situation. For example, you don't want to pair a slacker with a group that's all gung-ho, and you wouldn't want to include a jerk on the same team as a hothead. A character with a bad personality can really bring down the motivation and mental health of all of those around them, which can lead to confrontations that negatively affect the group as a whole. It's these simulation aspects that I enjoyed the most in State of Decay. I took great pleasure in discovering which characters work best with one another, pairing them up for tasks that they excel in, and making the absolute most of what the game's RNG dealt me. Managing your settlements is also a big draw of the game. Here, your group can rest and recover from exploring, and you can store your numerous supplies, weapons, tools, and vehicles. Every base has a set number of areas that you can construct or upgrade, and you will need to carefully choose what you want to build based on your current situation. If you have an abundance of survivors, you may want to construct a barrack so that they have a place to sleep. Along with that, a garden would also be ideal, considering your crew will need to eat in order to stay healthy. Storage rooms are excellent if you've been hoarding valuables, while a clinic will enable injured survivors to recover much more quickly. You also have places such as the library for conducting research, a training yard where combat attributes can be boosted, and a workshop for crafting and repairing. Eventually, you will need to relocate, either because you've outgrown your current place, or you have exhausted resources in the area, or maybe it's been overrun by the Walking Dead. There are 8 home sites in total spread across the map that you can establish as your base of operations, and each has its own pros and cons. You can't set up just anywhere, which is a bit of a bummer, as there are quite a few locations in the game that I felt would be perfect to make a home. As it is, though, you do have a good amount of freedom in how you design each settlement, how you set up your defenses, and which jobs to assign your survivors. The one real hurdle in settlement building is providing enough resources to satisfy your group. Being low in any one area will lead to your survivors accruing stress. With enough stress, survivors can receive permanent penalties to their stats, and may become too depressed to work, leave the crew to manage on their own, or even commit suicide. As such, it's imperative that you keep a constant eye on how things are going back at home, because being gone for too long can really diminish everyone's morale. I suppose I should mention that this becomes all the more crucial when permadeath is involved. When characters die, they are gone for good, and the game immediately autosaves over the one file that you can have per campaign. If this happens, you will need to then decide to either leave their valuables behind or fight your way back to retrieve what they were carrying. This includes, of course, confronting the character that you were formerly playing as, which is all too surreal, especially if you've developed a type of bond with that particular character. What's most frustrating is when a character dies when you aren't controlling them. This can happen when the base is attacked, or when they are aiding you on a supply run, or even due to overwhelming stress. It puts a great deal of tension on the player and forces you to really make every decision count. As infuriating as it can be though, I do think permadeath makes the game much better. If you could simply reload a previous file after you've made a poor decision, then there'd be no need to be so cautious, to be so meticulous, and to fight as if your life is really on the line. Permadeath really makes State of Decay a horrifying experience when the chips are stacked against you. Although you'll be spending a lot of time tending to your group at the base, the majority of the game is spent away from home and vulnerable to the beasts that roam about. To maintain your defenses, you're going to need supplies. Every building, from houses to sheds, businesses, and warehouses, can be scoured as you try to make out with their valuables. A lot of what you find is randomized, much like the rest of the game, but you can always improve your chances by searching particular areas. If you're in need of gasoline, gas stations are the obvious choice, the same as clinics are for medical stashes. Houses often have the greatest variety, however, as you're just as likely to find a ton of food as you are a stockpile of firearms. There's always the chance of finding something rare, too, either a powerful weapon or a crafting part that's necessary for upgrading a portion of your home base. Because you'll be exploring such a large area and carrying back a lot of supplies, vehicles are an important part of State of Decay. You'll find various cars, trucks, and vans spread out across the map, and you can commandeer any of these should you need to bring back a heap of goods or make a quick getaway. I found the heavier vehicles to be the best, as not only can they carry more cargo and sustain more damage, but the handling is so much better. I never quite got used to the fast acceleration and slippery controls of the smaller cars, thus I'd end up destroying my ride far too soon. Add to that a physics engine that seems to flip your car for hitting the most trivial of things, and you're more likely to end up stranded in a dangerous area than actually making it home safely. The best moments of the game aren't part of its story, but come from the unscripted situations that you may find yourself in. No matter how well you prepare, you're going to find yourself in a bad way at some point. Maybe your car is broken down and you must trek it through the woods alone, or maybe a truly massive horde crosses your path and you must hunker down in an abandoned home until they pass. These are the moments that set State of Decay apart from previous zombie titles. It's not just the fear of being consumed by the undead, but all the unpredictable scenarios that must be overcome. As expected, you'll be doing a lot of fighting in State of Decay. Combat is rather bare bones, unfortunately, but it does get the job done. You only have one standard melee attack combo, so no mixing fast and strong attacks. You can also execute an incapacitated foe, often when they are on the ground, and you're able to perform a dodge roll as well as a counterattack if your fighting skill is high enough, but these moves can drain a lot of stamina, so you need to engage in close quarters combat carefully. Using firearms or explosives are highly recommended to soften the horde before they get near. There is a reliance on stealth, but again, it's pretty basic stuff. You can sneak upon an unsuspecting foe to kill them quickly and silently, which is probably your best bet when entering a new area. If a group is in your way, you can throw certain objects to distract the brain-dead enemies. Just be aware that you may alert more zombies than intended. One of my favorite ways to take out a troublesome group of zombies is to go bowling with cars. Yes, it's a good way to tear up your vehicle, but I get a sick sense of satisfaction barreling downhill into a fleshy mob of brain eaters. Plus, if one grabs onto your vehicle, you can smack them with the car door for a satisfying thump. I love it. While zombies are the only enemies you'll encounter in State of Decay, they come in a good variety. Standard flesh eaters do exactly as you expect, lumber towards you aggressively and try to take a big chunk out of you. Occasionally, you'll find sprinters, who can be a real headache. It's difficult to nail them with a melee attack because they tend to leap a few feet away from you and latch on, so typically get them with a headshot when possible. In addition to standard zombies, you have special ones called freaks. These are much more powerful undead creatures, each with their own special abilities, and can randomly spawn into the world at any given time, though they do tend to appear more frequently the longer you play. Screamers are armless beings that shuffle in your direction and routinely lure other zombies to your location via their frightening scream. If you're too close when they yell, their voice can stun you, leaving you open to the bites of the hungry swarm. Luckily, these usually go down with just a couple of hits, so taking them out should be top priority. Bloaters are bulbous monsters that spew toxic acid that slowly burns your flesh. Getting close is practically a death sentence, so you'll want to fire a few bullets to cause them to explode. Sometimes you'll encounter the shuffling corpse of a former SWAT team member. While these don't have any special attributes per se, their bulletproof gear keeps them safe from most gunfire, thus you'll need to get up close and personal in order to eliminate them. Juggernauts are large, brutish fiends that move slow but are immensely powerful. When their blows connect, they can send survivors flying, leaving them susceptible to further damage. Sometimes they'll try to close the gap by charging forward, which is hard to avoid if you're not expecting it. As long as you keep your distance, you should be fine, but be aware that Juggernauts can eat up tons of damage before going down, meaning it's a huge possibility you'll run out of ammunition before you defeat them. Lastly, you have ferals. Ferals are among the most terrifying creatures I've ever encountered in gaming. Seriously, these stealthy monsters will stalk you from afar and then pounce when you're at your most vulnerable. Their speed allows them to quickly ambush you like a cheetah before you have the chance to properly defend yourself, and don't even think about outrunning them. Once you turn to flee, you're practically already dead. Firearms are your best bet, but their intense speed allows them to often dodge your bullets, especially when facing them head-on. After encountering your first feral, I guarantee you'll never truly feel safe playing State of Decay ever again. One of the most talked about features of State of Decay is that, while it's a single-player game, it seemingly continues to play after you've turned it off. This works much like Animal Crossing or other titles that use the console's clock. Depending on how much time has passed from your last save, when you boot up your file, you may be met with any number of issues, be it a survivor that has perished in the wild, to base defenses left in shambles after an intense attack, or the overall morale of the group greatly diminished. This caused a good deal of criticism when it first released, as players encountered devastating consequences for not having logged on for a couple of days. This feature was toned down in the Year 1 Survival Edition. For such major events to happen, you need to be away for several weeks at least, and at that point you'll probably want to start a brand new file anyway. Instead, you're more likely to be greeted with more minor issues, such as a need for additional food, or a single survivor growing a bit depressed. These take a simple supply run or side quest to remedy, and feels much more beneficial to the gaming experience rather than a hindering gimmick. There are a few other changes in the Year 1 Survival Edition. A lot of it's cosmetic, such as a new HUD to make navigating menus far easier, as well as redone animations and additional music. Some other minor additions are new vehicle types, the ability to craft ammunition at the workshop, incendiary shotguns, and the ability to prepare coffee and snacks for a quick pick-me-up at your base's kitchen. The only other major gameplay difference are Cleo missions. At random points in the game, you'll be alerted to an airdrop cache of supplies in the area. Should you investigate, you'll find a package filled with valuable supplies, and sometimes included are more powerful versions of weapons that you'll normally find in the game. The one downside is that these supply drops have attracted a massive group of zombies due to the signal it emits, so you'll need to weigh the risk versus the reward with each encounter. Now, on to the DLCs. The first expansion was titled Breakdown and came roughly 5 months after the core game's release. Breakdown is in essence a sandbox mode that allows players to safely ignore all story-related content and just focus on survival. For people who have completed the main campaign, or those who want something easier to just jump into and play, Breakdown is for you. You'll start the game as a random character. After certain thresholds have been met, the player will unlock the ability to escape the valley, completing the level. Afterwards, the player is then dropped back into a reverted map with an increased difficulty. As the difficulty rises, the amount of supplies, survivors, vehicles, and other beneficial items decreases, while the percentage of freaks and other harmful things becomes much higher. Once you've reached a certain level, you can choose to start the game from that level all the way up to the nightmarish level 99. Lifeline is the second DLC and is a much more proper expansion than Breakdown. This mode provides a brand new story revolving around a surviving military unit trapped in the city of Danforth. The map is much more urban in nature as opposed to the rural Trumbull Valley, creating a more claustrophobic feeling rather than the disparity of being lost out in the woods. As to be expected, there are a slew of new weapons, vehicles, survivors, and more in the Lifeline expansion, all largely military-based. A key gameplay addition are danger zones, which are extremely volatile areas that repeatedly spawn zombies until the site is cleared. To clear a danger zone, the player must maintain control of it, similar to a King of the Hill match in a shooter. This is a great addition for those that really love the base game, but want something a bit different in both gameplay and feel. While State of Decay is published by Microsoft, it's still ultimately an indie title. As such, it's not surprising that the game has its fair share of bugs and jankiness. Even playing on the upgraded Year 1 Survival Edition, you'll experience plenty of texture pop-ins, frame rate stutters, and some extreme clipping issues. On numerous occasions, I was able to execute a zombie through a wall because he was so close to it. On the flip side, I had on more than one occasion a zombie somehow ignore my boarded up doors and windows and just warp inside the room. It's not to the point of game breaking, but it's especially annoying considering fortifying your location is such a huge part of the game. You also have zombies consistently popping up from a prone position to standing when you get near them while sneaking. If you're not careful, the sudden movement may catch you off guard and ruin your attempt to sneak by. The soundtrack to State of Decay is superb, with tracks often packed with tension and emotion. This shouldn't come as much surprise considering it was written by acclaimed video game composer Jesper Kyd. Known for his work on the Hitman, Assassin's Creed, and Borderlands franchises, among plenty of others, Jesper Kyd delivers another excellent soundtrack here. His emphasis on acoustic instruments, such as guitars, pianos, and violins, helps transport the player to the rural mountains of Trumbull Valley. If you've not played State of Decay, and you are a fan of any of the other notable survival games that have emerged in the last decade, I recommend giving it a go. It's not genre-defining, but it does leave an impact. The game somehow manages to feel like an ever-evolving online experience, even as a single-player title, and that's truly impressive. I would advise getting the Year 1 Survival Edition if at all possible. It has enough significant enhancements to make it superior to the original game, but if you have to settle, then I think you'll find that it's still a lot of enjoyment. It's also not the scariest game involving zombies, but the tension it creates with permadeath, unpredictability, and those fearsome ferals will undoubtedly keep you on your toes this Halloween.